Are you James William Kent?
Yes, sir.
James William Kent, you stand indicted on 2 counts. On the first count, you are charged...
James William Kent has been charged with assaulting 2 CID officers in the course of their duty. The police allege that Kent has been observed tampering with the door handles of several parked cars in Paxton Street. The 2 officers decided that he was loitering with intent to commit an arrestable offence and told him that they were arresting him as a suspected person. Kent resisted, and in the course of the struggle, one of the police officers was knocked to the ground and the other was kicked on the shin.
James William Kent, how say you? Are you guilty or not guilty?
Was the defendant hard of hearing?
No, sir.
Do you understand the charge?
Yeah, I understand the charge right enough, sir.
Then perhaps you'll be good enough to enter a plea.
Oh, and I didn't do nothing, sir. Honest.
Not guilty, then?
That's right, sir. Not guilty.
Very well, you may sit down. Mrs. Montgomery, before we swear a jury in, just tell me this, will you? The accused was arrested for an offence under the Vagrancy Act 1824, being a suspected person loitering with intent. Now, that can only be tried in a magistrate's court, can it not?
Indeed, Your Honour.
Well, has the charge already been taken care of?
No, Your Honour. Since the accused elected to have this more serious offence tried by a jury, it was decided not to proceed with the charge under the Vagrancy Act, since the accused would have no right to a trial by jury under that act.
Yes, well, that seems a fair and just course to have adopted under the circumstances, Mrs. Montgomery.
The accused is charged with assaulting police officers whilst they were attempting to effect a lawful arrest upon him. Now, members of the jury, the charge was being made under the Vagrancy Act of 1824, which permits the arrest of suspected persons who are loitering with intent to commit an arrestable offence. In this case, theft. Now, I'm sure you all know, as a general rule in a criminal case, the prosecution are not permitted to be the first to mention an accused's past bad record. But the Vagrancy Act provides one of the very rare exceptions. Now, what these 2 police officers knew about the accused was that he had been convicted as an incorrigible rogue. That is to say, in 1973, he was 3 times convicted of being a suspected person and loitering with intent. And having been 3 times convicted, he was sent to this court and convicted here as an incorrigible rogue. Therefore, on the night of the 22nd of January...
Well, I don't see why not. We've done it before.
You know what I call it, Albert?
Now, what, Tom?
A diabolical liberty, this one. I mean to say, if the geezer getting done for sass when he's got a good form, well, he ain't got no chance, has he?
I will now call the evidence for the prosecution. Detective Constable Forster.
Detective Constable Forster.
His word against 2 law, in and out like a dozen assaults.
3 months and no messing about.
Wow, carpet ain't so bad in the winter, is it? I mean, 8 weeks and you're out again, aren't you? With a pair of DPA boots and a letter to the Social Security.
Officer Forster, were you on patrol duty in Paxton Street, Fulchester, on the 22nd of January at 6 o'clock in the evening?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
You were accompanied by a fellow officer, I believe.
Yes, ma'am, Dunlop.
Now, were you patrolling on foot or in a police car?
We parked our car around the corner and were patrolling on foot, ma'am.
Why did you do that?
We were on special duty, Your Honour.
Special duty?
Yes, Your Honour. A number of motorists had complained that their cars had been tampered with in Paxton Street, and the DI had ordered us to keep a special watch.
I see, yes. Thank you.
Did you see anything in Paxton Street?
Yes, Your Honour, the accused. Ma'am.
And what was he doing?
He was trying car door handles.
Trying to open them, you mean?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, were these the door handles of one car or more than one?
Several, ma'am. At least 5 or 6. He'd try the handles of one car, find them locked, and then pass on to the next.
Now, had you ever seen the accused before?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you know anything about him?
I knew he was an incorrigible rogue, ma'am.
You mean you knew he'd been convicted as an incorrigible rogue?
Yes, Your Honour.
And what action did you take?
Once we were certain of what he was up to, we approached him, and Constable Dunlop told him that he was arresting him as a suspected person loitering with intent to commit a theft, ma'am.
So he was told precisely for what offence he was being arrested?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was his reaction?
He struck out violently at me with his fist, ma'am. I was taken off guard, I lost my balance and fell to the ground.
Are you saying that he hit you with his fist?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you sustain any injury?
When I cracked my skull on the pavement, I was stunned for a few seconds. I grazed my cheek slightly, but otherwise I was unhurt. There's nothing at all, really.
It's a very generous view, officer. What happened after you were knocked to the ground?
My colleague, Detective Constable Dunlop, tried to restrain the accused. The accused kicked out viciously and caught him on the shins. However, he managed to pinion the accused up against the railings, by which time I had regained sufficiently to render him assistance. We then took him to our patrol car and radioed for a police van.
And reinforcements duly arrived and the accused was taken into custody.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think you were not present when he was charged.
No, ma'am.
Thank you, officer.
Constable Forster, how long had you been keeping the accused under observation before you arrested him as a suspected person? Well, if you've been tampering with the handles of 5 or 6 cars, that must have been quite some time.
About 8 minutes or so, sir.
I see. Do you think that he noticed that you were watching him?
No, sir. No, we were able to take cover behind parked cars.
I see. You mean you sort of ducked out of sight every time he turned round?
Yes, sir.
But how were you able to see that he was trying the car door handles if you yourselves were so preoccupied with keeping out of sight?
Well, he was trying them, sir. There's no doubt about that.
Are you sure about that, Constable?
Yes, sir.
I mean, could it be that because you knew the defendant so well and knew that he had already been convicted as an incorrigible rogue, you simply took it for granted that he was trying car door handles because that is what you would have expected to see?
No, sir, he was doing it all right.
Ah. Well, what were the licence numbers of the cars?
I didn't make a note of those, sir.
Oh. Well, did you alert the fingerprint department about the matter?
No, sir. It's not usual police procedure to make a fingerprint examination in a case where a person is loitering with intent to commit an arrestable offence.
In case it slipped your mind, officer, I might point out that my client is standing trial for an alleged assault on the police, not for being a suspected person.
Yes, sir.
And you do realise that because you failed to get the licence numbers of the cars you allege my client was trying to enter and therefore cannot properly identify them, it's impossible to check with the owners your statement that the cars were actually there, or to test them for fingerprints.
I did not think it was necessary, sir.
Because your word should be enough?
I did make a note of the make and colour of a couple of the cars, sir. There were 2 red Morris 1100s and a metallic Ford Escort.
You failed to get the licence numbers, you failed to notify the fingerprint department, but you did notice the make and number of some of the cars. Dear me. Oh, well, let's come to the alleged assault itself, shall we? Now, you say that my client knocked you to the ground with a violent blow delivered with a clenched fist.
That's right, sir, yes.
Yeah. How exactly?
Sir?
Oh, I'm sorry, officer, if I can be a little more explicit. With which fist did he hit you, the right or the left?
Well, I don't recall that, sir.
Ah, well, perhaps I can help you. From which direction did the blow travel? Where did it land on you?
About there, sir.
Yeah, now, would you say that a blow that landed at the point that you've indicated would almost certainly have been delivered with the right hand?
Well, it could have been delivered with either hand, sir.
Well, look, just to clear up any doubt, would you be kind enough to demonstrate a right-hand punch?
May I ask what point you're trying to make by this, Mr. Fry?
Your Honour, I'm simply trying to establish the direction in which a right-hand blow would normally travel.
Very well. Will you comply with counsel's wishes?
Just,
Oh, thank you, officer. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I know nothing about boxing, but that looks to me like a pretty expert demonstration.
Well, I'm a member of the Fulchester Police Amateur Boxing Team, sir.
Yes, of course you are. That's the police sports club crest on your blazer, isn't it?
Yes, it is, sir.
Well, as your Honour will have noticed from that expert demonstration, would you hear us again, please? Hold it there. A right-hand blow would normally tend to veer towards the left, and conversely, a left-hand blow would normally tend to veer towards the right. Thank you, officer. Now, you have indicated that my client hit you on the upper left-hand side of the chest, just below the shoulder. Is that right?
Yes, sir, I have, sir.
You're quite sure about that?
Yes, sir.
Well, even if you weren't sure at the time, you would now agree, as you yourself have expertly demonstrated, that a blow that landed at the point that you have indicated would almost certainly have been delivered with the left hand.
Well, yes, it may well have been, sir, yes.
Well, left hand or right, you did say that my client knocked you to the ground with a violent blow delivered with a clenched fist.
Yes, sir.
Yes. At this point, Your Honour, I should like to draw your attention to a medical report on my client from the Fulchester prison doctor. It's an agreed report made a week after my client's arrest. That is on the 29th of January.
Yes, I have that here, Mr. Fry.
Your Honour will notice that in the second paragraph, the doctor states that my client suffers from acute arthritic inflammation. of the metacarpal joints of both his right and left hands. In layman's terms, the knuckles, and that he's barely able to close his hands.
Yes, it does say that.
Constable Forster, are you seriously expecting this court to believe that a man who was so severely afflicted by arthritis that he could barely close his fingers, let alone make a fist, knocked you, a member of the police boxing club, so hard that you fell to the ground?
But it might have been more of a push, sir.
More of a push, eh?
Do you wish to re-examine this witness?
Yes, Your Honour. On the 22nd of January, it would, of course, have been quite dark by 6 o'clock in the evening, wouldn't it?
Yes, ma'am, it would.
Now, is there any street lighting in Paxton Street?
There are a few street lamps, ma'am, but it's not particularly well lit.
I see. Well, could what happened when the defendant resisted arrest be described as something of a free-for-all?
Yes, ma'am, it could.
And amid all the flying arms and legs, did you and your colleague simply have your work cut out restraining the defendant?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
Thank you.
Very well, officer, you may leave the witness box.
Your Honour, I wonder if I might have your permission to go to another court.
What, in this building?
Yes, it is, Your Honour.
Well, as long as you're available, if we need you.
Of course, Your Honour.
Been swearing Jim's life away, have you, son?
Look, just leave it out, you two, OK?
Of course he is. Mixing it for geezer what ain't done nothing is what they train them doggies to do best.
Yeah, from what I hear, they have special classes for it. And the teacher dishes out prizes to the couple what can think up the most diabolical verbals.
Lady C.I.D. Couldn't find out nothing about nothing if it wasn't for grasses. And making up a load of old cobblers in the witness box.
Now, listen, just shut your faces, right? Or else I'll nick the both of you for causing a disturbance.
Don't we, Albert? I think we've upset.
Oi!
Some people does the nuts a bit sharpish when you're front after them, eh? Can't stand to hear the truth, what it is.
We kept watch for approximately 8 minutes, during which time he attempted to open the near side doors of several cars. The last two were a red Morris 1100 and a metallic Ford Escort. We then approached and I said to him, "We've been keeping observation on you and I'm arresting you as a suspected person loitering with intent to steal." Detective Constable Forster took hold of the accused's arm. I was just about to caution him when he struck out at Constable Forster and knocked him to the ground. I then made an effort to restrain him and he kicked me in the shins.
He couldn't have been in the slightest doubt why he was being arrested.
Oh, no, Ma'am. He said, "It's a fair cop, Governor. I hope they've got my St. Peter warmed up down the nig."
Just in case anyone has any doubt, would you tell the court what that means?
I took it to mean that the accused admitted the offence for which he was being arrested and hoped that he would be allocated his same cell if he were to be sent to prison again, Your Honour.
Thank you, officer.
Officer, is the defendant known to you?
Oh, yes, Ma'am. Kent is only too well known to the Fulchester police.
He has convictions for loitering with intent to steal.
Yes, Ma'am.
In fact, he has sufficient convictions on this charge to have already been sentenced here as an incorrigible rogue.
Yes, Ma'am.
From what you could see in Paxton Street, he was up to his old tricks again.
Yes, Ma'am, he was.
I'm sorry to harp on this, officer. I just want to make it absolutely clear that the two police officers did not simply take it for granted that Kent was trying those car door handles, because that was what they expected to see.
You've told us that you are only too well aware of the defendant's previous record and that he's frequently been convicted of being a suspected person.
That is correct.
Do you happen to know how many convictions he has altogether?
Well, I don't know exactly, sir.
But he was known to you as a typical old lag.
Oh, yes, sir. He's been in and out of prison for the whole of his adult life, sir. And I believe he was sent to remand home as a child and later to approved school in Borstal, sir.
You seem to have made quite a study of my client's previous record. When did you read it?
Well, I haven't actually read it, sir.
Oh, so you mean you've simply passed your eye over it?
Well, no, sir. Well, I mean to say...
Well, what do you mean to say, officer? Would you kindly tell the court how it is that you have such extensive knowledge of my client's previous record when you've never even clapped eyes on it?
Oh, Kent's record is common knowledge at Fulchester Police Station, sir. Everyone knows about it.
Oh, I see. I suppose you have little chats about such old and valued customers as Mr. Kent over your cups of tea in the canteen and when you're on patrol.
No, sir, but several officers at the station have mentioned it to me, sir.
What are their names?
Detective Constable Forster has told me about it, and so has the DI, sir.
When you say the DI, do you mean the Detective Inspector of the Fulchester CID?
Yes, sir.
And when did he tell you about my client's previous record?
I was on patrol duty with another officer and the DI some 2 weeks earlier, sir. We saw the accused in the High Street, and the DI mentioned that he had one of the longest criminal records of the villains on our patch, sir. He said that Kent might be able to help us in our inquiries if his release from prison coincided with an outbreak of petty larceny in the district, sir.
Thefts from parked cars, for instance?
You could say so, sir.
Tell me, officer, how long have you been a member of the CID?
Just 2.5 years now, sir.
Just 2.5 years. Well, I don't want to belittle your competence in carrying out your duties as a police officer, but would you say that you're still cutting your teeth?
A CID officer learns fast, sir. He has to.
How well are you acquainted with the Vagrancy Act of 1824?
I know it very well, sir.
I'm sure you do. It's known in common parlance as sus, isn't it?
Yes.
Will you agree that it is one of the most difficult accusations for a known offender to disprove, and one of the easiest by which the police can gain a conviction?
I wouldn't know, sir.
Oh, calm now, officer. The formula for a successful prosecution of a known offender under the Vagrancy Act has been well established for over 100 years. All that is needed is for two police officers to say that they saw a man with a record as bad as that of my client loitering on a street corner, and that they had reason to believe, only that they had reason to believe, that he intended to commit an offence. And there you are. A 3-month sentence on conviction at a magistrate's court. No further evidence is needed. Is that right?
The defendant in such cases is usually convicted, yes.
Yes. And because of that, is it not also true that the arresting of known offenders on suspicion is precisely what young CID officers cut their teeth on in order to gain some experience of the courts and also to notch up a few convictions at the same time?
Junior officers can sometimes be asked to keep a close eye on parked cars in areas where there have been reports of thefts from vehicles. And if a known offender is seen loitering in such an area, it must be assumed that he's up to no good, sir.
Is that what you did, officer? Assume that my client was up to no good?
No, sir, I did not mean that. We saw him trying the doors.
There's just one question I want to ask you about my client's previous record. Has he ever been convicted of a violent crime?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Has he ever, to your knowledge, resisted arrest or assaulted the police or been remotely connected with anything of that sort?
No, sir. But there is a first time for everything. And on this occasion, he did put up a struggle, sir.
He put up a struggle, did he? That must have come as quite a shock to you and Detective Constable Forster.
It did a bit, sir.
Now then, when did he deny the charge? Was it in Paxton Street or when you got him back to the police station?
In Paxton Street, he said it was a fair cop, but he changed his mind shortly after we arrived at the station, sir.
When you got him back to the police station, you formally charged him under the Vagrancy Act?
Yes, sir. He made no reply then.
You didn't charge him with assault until some 2 hours later, did you?
No, sir.
And in the meantime, he received a visit?
Yes, sir. A man visited him in the cells.
That was Mr. Patrick Livingston, the superintendent of St. Matthew's Hostel for Ex-Prisoners.
Yes, sir. That was the man's name.
Is this Mr. Livingston going to give evidence?
He is, Your Honour. And how was it that Mr. Livingston came to be at the police station?
The defendant asked if he could telephone him.
I see. So Mr. Livingston had a talk to the defendant in the cells, and as a result, the defendant told you that he had not been doing anything wrong in Paxton Street and that he was not going to plead guilty on this occasion. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
You then charged him with assaulting the police?
That is correct.
But you did not bring this charge until then?
No, sir.
Well, isn't that odd? I mean, if, as you allege, he had kicked one of you in the shins and knocked the other one to the ground, why didn't you bring this charge in the first place?
We thought it advisable to discuss the matter with the DI before bringing the charge, sir.
When did this little conversation take place?
When, sir?
Yes, officer, when? At what time?
I did not make a note of the exact time, sir.
Never mind about the exact time. All I want you to tell this court is whether this little conversation took place before the defendant pleaded not guilty to being a suspected person or after.
I don't quite recall, sir.
Was it before or after?
It was, after, sir.
Thank you, officer. And yet you still expect this court to believe that this sudden decision to bring the much more serious charge of assault was in no way influenced by the defendant's sudden and completely unexpected refusal to plead guilty on the first charge.
He assaulted us and was charged with it, sir. That's all I can say.
Let me put it to you another way, officer. If the defendant had simply accepted his fate in his usual philosophical way and agreed to plead guilty to the first charge, would you then have charged him with assault?
Yes, sir.
You're not going to keep us hanging about here all day. All my life, what I'm doing here, I don't know.
Don't do your nut, Tom. We'll be out of here by opening time.
Yeah, and I'm going to have a few pints tonight, too, and all.
Hello, sunshine. Put your verbals in all right, have you? Bigger liar than Tom Pepper, and he's hot. Here, play your cards right, and you'll end up the first Spade Chief Commissioner.
It's isn't it? Hope you'll be around to put a word in for me.
You are James William Kent, and you reside at 22 North End Road, Fulchester, also known as St Matthew's House.
Fixed the boat, you see.
Yes, Mr. Kent?
Well, I don't never ever fix the boat, sir. See, you get done for sus all the time if you don't live nowhere. Well, you know, run by Mr. Livingston. Oh, he's a good bloke, he is. Livingston, know what I mean? It's one of your own. You know what I mean, sir?
Well, just answer the question, please, Mr. Kent. Is that your name and address?
Yeah, that's my name and address, right enough. He said he'd be here today to put a word in for me. Know what I mean, sir?
What is your present employment, Mr. Kent?
Oh, well, I used to do navvying, you know, but, I mean, that's the only job you can get. If you've been in the nick as long as I have. You know, well, I can't do any hard graft anymore. I like calling it my hands. They've got arthritis, haven't they? So I make the tea now and do odd jobs. I mean, I've been doing that since I got done to sus last time, when I wasn't even doing anything.
Your employers are Gilbert Bradford and Sons, the building contractors, is that right?
Yeah. He's a good bloke, old Mr. Bradford. See, ain't many people what'll give you a start when you've got cons, know what I mean, sir? Mr. Livingston chatted the governor into giving me a start. I've been there since I got out last time.
Yes, how long is it since you came out of prison?
Couple of weeks, ain't it, sir?
More like 2 months, surely.
As long as all that. God. You know, I ain't got much idea about time, you know, like, I mean, when you first go in the nick and you're doing the lagging, your bird seems to drag, sir. But after you've been in for a while, you know, and you've got a bit behind you, well, then it seems to go a bit more sharpish, like, and, well, months don't seem no more than a week.
Mr. Kent, would you please try and answer Council's questions as simply as possible?
Yes, sir, but, you see, I never done nothing. Well, not this time. I mean, I'd have pleaded guilty if I'd had done. Like always, Your Honour.
The cases in Fulchester Crown Court are fictitious, but the jury is comprised of members of the general public. The Queen against Kent will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court. It's the second day of the trial of James William Kent, who's been charged with assaulting 2 CID officers in the course of their duty. Police officers have told the court that they saw Kent tampering with the door handles of several cars in Paxton Street, Fulchester, and that when they told him that they were arresting him as a suspected person, he punched one of the officers and kicked the other in the shins. In cases arising from the Vagrancy Act of 1824, it's permissible for the prosecution to draw the jury's attention to the previous convictions of the accused. Kent has been in and out of prison for the whole of his adult life, and the police have given evidence that they knew that he was a persistent offender and that in 1973 he'd been convicted of being an incorrigible rogue.
How many times have you been sent to prison altogether, Mr. Kent?
Oh, I don't know exactly. You see, I first got done when I was a kid. Well, I've been in and out ever since, I suppose. You've got it written down there on a piece of paper in front of you, ain't you, sir?
Yes, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Oh, I know, see, goes back a bit too far. See, I don't recall things so good nowadays. You know what I mean? I've done too much porridge, I suppose. But I do remember some things.
Well, perhaps you could tell us about the ones you remember, Mr. Kent.
Well, Mr. Kent? Oh, don't call me Mr. Kent, sir.
I beg your pardon?
Well, nobody calls me Mr. Kent. The only time I got called Mr. Kent was in court, just before they sent me away to eat a load of porridge. They ain't even grown yet.
I do hope we're going to make a little progress before too long, Mr. Fryer.
If it would save time, Your Honour, could I read out the antecedents which have been prepared?
Well, it certainly would save time.
I have no objections, Your Honour.
Well, Mr. Kent, you have a very long criminal record that reaches back into your childhood. You've no less than 22 convictions, and you've spent some 30 years of your life in prison for a variety of crimes, ranging from housebreaking to drunk and disorderly. Is that right, Mr. Kent?
Yeah, I reckon so.
I'll pass over the earlier convictions and deal with only the last half dozen or so. They read as follows. City of London Sessions, 26th of May, 1951, 3 years for larceny. Fulchester Crown Court, 13th of October, 1953, 4 years for larceny. Fulchester Magistrates Court, the 1st of November, 1957, 3 months for being a suspected person. The same offence the following year. In 1960, 10 years for stealing £5 from a public house. Since then, there have been 2 other 3-month sentences for being a suspected person. In 1973, you were deemed an incorrigible rogue and sentenced to 12 months' imprisonment. And you were released from Fulchester Prison on completion of a 6-month sentence for being drunk and disorderly in November of last year. Is all that correct?
Well, the thing is, you see, I-ups have been putting things down about me all my life, I suppose. If you've got it written down, it must be right.
But are the things that are written down about you correct?
Well, you see, the thing is, I only come to life on paper. You know what I mean, Your Honour?
Only exist on paper, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, I don't know, you know. What happens is, you see, they start putting things down about you when you're a kid. You know, like when I was in the kids' home. You know, like, I never had no mum or dad. You know, I was just the result of a one-night stand. I mean, that's all I was. You know what I mean, Your Honour? And they start putting things down about you from the minute you put in an appearance in the hospital, you know. I mean, they used to put bastard on your birth certificate in them days. You know, stamp it right across in big black letters. Didn't they, missus? You know, put it down from the off.
Let me ask you again. Were you guilty of all the crimes of which you've been convicted and for which you have spent 30 years of your life behind bars?
Well, pleaded guilty, didn't I?
But were you guilty?
Your Honour, this line of questioning simply isn't open to my learned friend. Once a man has been convicted, whether the plea be guilty or not guilty, he cannot afterwards be heard to say that he was innocent.
Yes, technically that is so, Mrs. Montgomery, but I see no harm in the questions. Were you guilty of all those offences, Mr. Kent?
Well, what it is, so like, you know, I don't want to cause any trouble, you know, but, like, when the law captured me and said they got me back to rights, you know, knocking off something and breaking in somewhere, I mean, even if I was only looking for somewhere to keep, you know, well, couldn't very well say I wasn't doing nothing, could I? So then the law says that they'd put a word in for me if I plead guilty. When it comes down to it, they don't put no word in for me. Only bad things. And then I finish up back in the nick again. Well, that's life, ain't it, Your Honour?
Where do you reckon he's got to, then?
Who?
Harold Wilson, your Burke. Oh, Pat Livingston.
He would ride to Australia if he's got any sense.
Look, he said he'd show up and put in a word for Jim, didn't he?
We must be potty here, coming to court of our own free will. This is the first time I've been here without handcuffs, mate. If I gets out, the first thing I'm going to do is get my head examined.
Look, if he said he'll show, he'll show. Unless he's got run over by a lorry.
No matter how strong you are, matey, you can always get rubbed out.
Mr. Kent, your record shows that this is the first time that you've been charged with the crime of violence. Is that right?
Oh, I ain't got no time for violence, sir. You know, I've seen a lot of it in my time. Know what I mean? Geezers carving one another up in the nick and sticking it on the screws in the law. No, that ain't my way, sir. if you know what I mean. I mean, I keeps myself to myself inside the nick and out.
Are you saying that you've never struck anyone in your life?
No, sir. I mean, I just said, haven't I? Take my way.
But you are charged with assaulting 2 police officers in the lawful execution of their duty.
Not me, sir. I wouldn't assault nobody. Well, I couldn't, could I? I mean, not with me arthritis.
Yes. Now, since your release from prison in November, you've been staying at St Matthew's Hostel for ex-prisoners, is that right?
Yeah. Best place I've been there since I come out. Best place I've ever lived.
Yeah.
Run by Mr Livingston. Oh, smashing bloke he is. One of your own, know what I mean, sir?
Yes. Now, how did you come to be living there?
Well, see, Mr Livingston came to see me when I was doing that hard stretch that time of being sloshed, know what I mean? And then he asked me if I'd like to go and stay there when I got out.
And you agreed?
Oh, no, not right off. It's funny for me, I've got to tell you this. You see, I thought he must be one of them social working people, you know, what comes to the prison and tells you what they're going to do for you and all that, you know, and then asks you if it ain't about time you pulled your socks up and all that old moody. You know what I mean?
Were telling us about Mr Livingston.
Oh, yeah. Well, Mr Livingston, he come to see me a few times. Always give me a smoke, Mr Livingston. Them welfare working people, they don't never give you a smoke. I mean, they come in their cell sometimes smoking, but they never bung you one. Anyway, after a while, me and Mr Livingston, we sits down and has a talk for about an hour or so. And then into death, I said I'd go and stay at St Matthew's when I got out. You know what I mean, Your Honour?
And how did you get on when you went to live at the hostel?
Oh, like I said, best place I've ever lived in all my life.
Yeah.
Do you know what? The morning that I got out, Mr Livingston came to meet me in his motor. Yeah, made me cry, it did. Do you know, he came right up to the gates and he opened the doors so that I could get in. I mean, nobody's ever come to meet me when I've got out before. And then he drove me back to the hostel. God, yeah, we had a smashing fry up for breakfast, yeah, rashes and eggs, you know, just like them blokes used to have in a condemned cell before they got topped.
Could you confine yourself to answering the questions, Mr Kent?
Why, have I done something wrong, Your Honour?
No, but just do as I say.
Yes. Oh, what was the question, Your Honour?
Mr Fry?
I think I was asking if you'd been offered the opportunity of a fresh start, an offer you'd never had before.
Nah, that's just the way you could put it, sir. You see, when I've come out and nick other times, I had nowhere to keep, you know, nowhere to live, nothing. And then all of a sudden, I've got a roof over my head. Well, must be a bit in front, mustn't I?
Yes. Now, I'd like you to cast your mind back to the evening of the 22nd of January this year.
When was that?
That was the evening you were arrested.
Oh, yeah, I've got it. Well, I ain't hardly likely to forget that in a hurry, am I, sir?
Yes, now, did you go to work on the building site that day?
Oh, yeah. Always go to work when I've got a job, you know, I mean, get your cards if you have days out, especially if you've been in prison.
So you went to work that day. Now, is there a time clock on the building site?
Yes, sir. You clock on 7:30 in the morning and you clock off 5:30 at night.
Yes, and what did you do then? Did you go back to the hostel?
No, sir. Went to the pub with a couple of mates of mine.
Which pub was this?
The Crown, sir. You see, me, Tom and Elf always gets in a couple of pints on our way home.
That would be Tom Bernard and Albert Hicks.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and did you all leave together after 2 or 3 pints?
Well, no. Not exactly, sir. You see, I had to leave before the others, because I had to collect a sack of spuds, you see. Up and up a sack of spuds, sir. Yeah, even with my own bad hands, you know. I mean, only £28, but I slings them over my shoulder from the greengrocers in the High Street, you know, for the lads' dinner back at the hostel. We take it in turns doing odd jobs like that. So I didn't like to let Mr Livingston down, if you get what I mean, sir.
I understand. And your route to the greengrocers, did it take you through Paxton Street?
Well, couldn't have, could it, sir?
Why not?
Well, you see, Paxton Street's right the other side of Fulchester, you know, a couple of streets from the Labour Exchange. Well, I mean, I'd never get over there unless I've got to sign on.
Mr Kent, are you saying that you were never even in Paxton Street that evening?
I couldn't have been, could I, sir? I mean, Otherwise, I'd have been late in collecting the sack of spuds. I mean, the shop shuts at 6.
Yes. Look, how do you account for the fact that 2 police officers have given evidence on oath that they saw you trying car door handles in Paxton Street at 6 o'clock?
Oh, sir. Not me. I think, you know what? I think them officers made a mistake. I mean, I can't see anything else for it.
Well, if you weren't in Paxton Street, where exactly were you when they arrested you?
Well, don't know exactly. See, what happened, sir, see, I came out the pub and I walked along the street a bit and then I cut through the back doubles. Know what I mean? Well, then, to get to the high street, see what I mean? Well, then, I goes walking down one of these side turnings, minding my own business like, when all of a sudden, these 2 plainclothes chaps comes up to me. And one of them said, "Hello, Jim. Seen you trying car door handles, you're nicked." Then one of them grabs hold of me.
And you're absolutely certain that this did not take place in Paxton Street?
I wasn't anywhere near it. Honest, I wouldn't. You know, and then, as I said, one of them grabs hold of me, and no, acting like I was to sort of give him a push, you know, because all of a sudden he fell over. You know, didn't mean to hurt him. And I helped him to get up.
You helped him to his feet after he fell?
That's right, sir.
And what about the officer? Did you kick him in the shins?
Kick him in the shins? Of course not, sir. I won't kick nobody in those shins.
Now, Mr. Kent, is there anything else you remember about that incident?
Oh, yeah. There is one thing I remember.
What is it?
Well, you see, there wasn't any cars parked in that street what they nicked me in, you see, because there was them double yellow lines down either side. Now, I remember that when I was on remand, you see, so I couldn't have been trying car door handles if there wasn't any parked cars, could I, sir?
Tell me, Mr. Kent, do you have a grudge against society?
Well, no. I don't reckon so. Well, not anymore anyway. You see, I think it's people's own fault if they treat people well they wouldn't fancy being treated themselves, you know. In any case, you know, I don't think it does any good holding things against people for the way they're made.
Well, that seems to me a profoundly philosophical point of view. I don't think you're nearly as inarticulate as you'd have us believe.
What's inarticulate, ma'am?
You seem to be able to express yourself very well when you put your mind to it.
Oh, yeah, well, I suppose you can say that I've been a bit better at rabbiting since I met Mr. Livingston.
Do you mean talking?
Yes, sir.
And say talking.
You see, talking. You see, before I met Mr. Livingston, I couldn't hardly talk to anybody about nothing, you know. Well, I mean, when I first went in, the Nick, they had the rule of silence, so it didn't matter anyway, did it?
This Mr. Livingston seems to be a miracle worker. I'd like to hear more about him.
Oh, ain't nothing special about him, ma'am, you know. Like, he's just an ordinary sort of bloke.
Come now, do you really expect the court to believe that a perfectly ordinary man has cast a spell over you? That has transformed you from being a persistent offender into a hard-working, honest and useful member of society?
Ah, well, you said it, ma'am, not me. But I'll tell you one thing. He's done more good for me without even half trying than all them hundreds of social welfare people I've known in all my life, who ain't even done no more than tell me to pull me socks up. Sometimes I ain't even got any socks to pull up anyway.
Yeah, they ain't half giving poor old Jim a right going over.
Yeah. You was to ask me, I don't reckon he's done himself no favour pleading not guilty.
Plead guilty whether done or not, that's my motto.
Yeah, gets it over sharpish and no messing about.
Yeah, ends up with more porridge if you plead not guilty. Well-known fact, that is.
Judge gets a needle at you for wasting his time and the taxpayers' brass.
Right pair of Burks we are, coming here of our own free will to put in a word for him. Probably finish up with half a stretch down to Larkin.
What's you going? I'll pleased to see you, mate.
And me and all.
Oh, sorry to be late. How's it going?
All right.
Very well, Mr. Kent. Now, you say you were not anywhere near Paxton Street at the time that you were arrested. Is that right?
Wasn't me in Paxton Street. Honest, it wasn't. You know, I think them two officers made a mistake, like I said.
But none of this was suggested by your counsel to the two police officers when they gave their evidence. Have you just invented it?
I never did, Mum, did I?
Well, if it wasn't Paxton Street, which street was it?
Oh, I don't know what street it was. See, it had them double yellow lines down either side, and it didn't have no parked cars.
But the street surrounding the Crown Public House where you and your friends had been drinking must be familiar to you.
Yeah, but I don't know what they're called.
Well, is it on your usual route from your place of work to the hostel and back again?
Well, go through it sometimes, I think.
Well, can you tell us the names of some of the other streets in that area?
No, well, as I said, we walk through there sometimes, but I never see what they're called.
Not one?
No.
But you do know the exact location of Paxton Street.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have to go through it to get to the Labour Exchange, don't you?
Indeed you do, Mr. Kent. But there are other streets that you have to go through in order to get from the Crown to the High Street, from your place of work to the hostel and so on. But you are not able to tell us the name of a single one of them. How many drinks had you had at the Crown before you left to collect this sack of potatoes from the greengrocer's?
Couple.
How many?
Well, maybe a couple of pints of bitter, maybe 3.
2 or 3 pints of beer? Or which was it, 2 or 3?
Well, 3, I reckon.
Well, did you drink any spirit?
Well, I used to drink meths, Mum, but I gave that up a long while back because I found it don't do your inside no good.
I meant whiskey or gin.
Well, yeah, no, I think Tom did treat me to a whiskey. See, back the winner at a 3:30, if you know what I mean, Mum.
A whiskey? By that do you mean a single?
Well, like, just a nip, like, you know.
1? Or more than 1?
Well, yeah, I think Albert treated me to one, now you come to mention it, Mum.
And did you buy a round in return?
Dunno, I might have done.
Well, surely it's no more than etiquette for drinking men to match each other round for round when they're out on the binge.
Yeah, well, now you come to mention it, I think I did get me round in. But it wasn't no binge like you're saying, Mum. You know, I mean, we were just wetting our whistles on our way home from work, like always.
I see. So you're proud of your prowess as a heavy drinker, then, are you?
Well, I suppose you can say I've done my share.
Indeed I could, Mr. Kent. Your record is littered with convictions for being drunk and disorderly, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been done for it a few times, so I suppose you could be right in saying that.
Well, tell me, were you drunk when you left the Crown?
Well, let's put it this way, Mum. It would take more than I had that night to get me sloshed.
But if you were drunk, you wouldn't have known where you were, would you?
Yeah, well, you see, I never buy booze until I've give Mr. Livingston the Duke of Kent.
You mean the rent?
That's right, sir. You see, nobody ain't allowed in the hostel if they're pissed. Do you know that's the only rule that he's double on?
I see. So you were stone cold sober. You were not in Paxton Street at 6 o'clock on the evening of the 22nd of January. You were not trying any car door handles, and you did not assault either of the police officers. Is that right?
Well, I've said so over and over again, haven't I?
Well, can you think of any other reason why this false charge should have been brought against you?
Well, see, the thing is, I don't like to say, you see, because it'd be bad for me if I did, if you know what I mean.
Well, come now, there you stand, an entirely innocent man. There must be something you know that nobody else does.
Well, you see, the thing is, it'd be worse for me if I did, like I said. But, well, I suppose as I'm going to land up back in the nick again, I don't suppose it matters much anyhow. You see, the thing is, what I said about them two officers making a mistake, well, that wasn't strictly true.
I see. You've not been telling the truth.
That's right, Mum.
Well, perhaps you'd now tell His Honour and the members of the jury what really happened.
Well, see, the thing is, them two officers what nicked me for sus, well, that wasn't no mistake. The thing is, once you've got plenty of form, you ain't got no chance, have you? You see, like, the full strength is that, like, say, the police says a geezer what's been in and out all his life has done something, well, he ain't got no chance, has he? I mean, I should know, because I've done more than enough time, haven't I? You know what I mean, Your Honour? So, you know, I mean, I always reckon that it's favourite to plead guilty to whatever I've got my collar felt for. You know, whether I've done it or whether I ain't.
Do you really expect the members of the jury to believe that this charge of assaulting the police was trumped up and brought against you because of your previous record?
You see, since I got out last time, I've been living at the hostel, trying to keep my nose clean, know what I mean? I mean, I wasn't in Paxton Street when they said they was, and I wasn't trying any car door handles anywhere. You know, I mean, I don't expect anybody to believe me, Mum, but, you know, I don't care one way or another if they don't.
So the police are lying, are they, Mr. Kent?
Well, they must be, Mum, mustn't they?
Mr. Kent, there's just one further question I would like to ask you with regard to your previous convictions.
Yes, sir.
All told, there were 22 of them. How many have come before a judge and jury?
I don't know what you're on about, sir. You know, because, I mean, you only go to the sessions to get sentenced, don't you?
Quite. This is the first time that you have spoken up in your defence in court, isn't it? The first time in 30 years.
And it's the first time I've pleaded not guilty, you know.
Can you tell us why?
Yeah, well, see, the thing is, Mr. Livingston said that I was to plead not guilty if I ain't. And I ain't. You know, I mean, other times I ain't cared whether I've got another stretch or not, you know, whether I've got done for what I've been charged with or not. You know, I mean, you see, I've always looked on the nick as me proper own, you know what I mean? Like, better off in than out, as you might say. But, well, this time I don't want to go back there if I can help it, if you know what I mean.
One last question, Mr. Kent. Would you say that you are an incorrigible rogue?
Oh, don't know what that is, sir. But if it's anything like a diabolical villain, I ain't.
The cases in Fulchester Crown Court are fictitious, but the jury is comprised of members of the general public. The Queen against Kent will be concluded tomorrow in the Crown Court. James William Kent, a recidivist with a long criminal record, has been charged with assaulting 2 CID officers when they arrested him for being a suspected person in Paxton Street, Fulchester on the 22nd of January. Kent, having elected to give evidence under oath, has admitted that his record is bad, but denies that he assaulted the officers and that he was behaving suspiciously. Since his release from prison in November, he's been living at St Matthew's Hostel for ex-prisoners, and he insists that the influences that he's come under at the hostel have given him the will to go straight. Counsel for the defence has called Albert Hicks, who is also an inmate of St Matthew's Hostel.
Mr. Hicks, you know the defendant, do you not?
Oh, Jim, yeah, I know him right enough.
As well as living at the hostel, you are both employed by Gilbert Bradford and Sons, the building contractors.
That's right. I started off navvying, same as Jim see, but I've been there a long time now, so I got promotion into the quantity surveyor's office about 9 months ago.
But you have been in prison?
Certainly have, but not for a long time now.
How long exactly?
A bit over 2 years now.
And before you went to live at the hostel, did you ever manage to stay out of trouble for so long?
No, I didn't, sir. I was in and out the nick like I had a season ticket.
And he must be out of my sodding mind coming here of my own free will.
Don't worry, Tom, you'll be all right.
I'll be all right when I'm 800 miles from here, mate. Look, courts is where they dish out porridge, mate, and a bloke with a bit of form could get a plateful. Just be showing his face.
Yeah, I know how hard it was for you to come here today, Tom, but just answer their questions and nothing will happen to you.
Couldn't half do with a point. It's all right for geezers like you with your old school tie and your pan-note accent. But there ain't no way they're going to believe a word I say, even if I swear on my mother's eyesight. God rest his soul.
If Jim gets off, I'll buy you enough beer to bath in.
You're a pretty safe wicket there, mate.
Well, if he goes down, there's always the courts of appeal.
What's the point of going on about other people's rights and one thing and another the way you do?
Well, you think Jim would be better off pleading guilty, whether he did it or not?
Too bleeding sure I do.
Well, if he's going to end up in prison either way, as you think he will, Why not give him a fight for once?
You've got a lot to learn, Pat, about what goes on in a bloke's nut when he gets his collar felt.
I'd like you to cast your mind back to the evening of the 22nd of January this year.
The night Jim got his collar felt, you mean?
When you finished work that evening, where did you go?
We're down to Boozer's, sir. Me and Jim and Tom Bernard, sir. We always go down for a few after work, you see. We use the Crown.
And the defendant was definitely with you?
Oh, yeah, Jim was there, no doubt about that. We always use the Crown, unless we're skint, of course.
I see. And approximately how long did you stay there?
Well, we left work about 5, must have got down there about past. Yeah, well, we got a few down, and then Jim said he had to leave in half hour or so, because he had to collect a sack of potatoes from the greengrocers in the High Street. Dead worried he was about that and all, because he didn't want to let the governor down, you see.
The governor?
Mr. Livingston, sir. You know, he's the superintendent at St Matthew's. Jim was a bit worried, so he went off, and me and Tom had a game of darts.
Mr. Hicks was extremely keen to pull his weight at the hostel.
Oh, no doubt about that, whatever, sir. He was real keen to have a right go at going straight. He thought he'd given up villainy for good, and I had to bet my week's wages on that. So when I got home and found he hadn't even turned up with the potatoes, and the next thing I hear, he's been done for sus and he's having a go at the law, well, I was double choked, wasn't I?
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. You've been most helpful. Would you stay there, please?
Would I be right in assuming that the defendant is a bosom pal of yours?
Well, I've only known him since he came to the hostel, miss.
And how long's that?
A couple of months.
But you do get on well together?
Well, all the lads get on at St Matthew's, miss. It's a bit like a club, you know.
You try to help each other?
Well, I reckon so.
You reckon so? I put it to you that you came here today fully prepared to do anything you could to help your friend in the dock. I suggest you'd even commit perjury if you thought that by so doing your friend would go free. Is that right?
That's far from right, miss. Well, I mean, a bloke likes to help a mate what's got into a spot of bother, but it'd be a right Bert, wouldn't it, to chance his own liberty by giving false evidence in court. Now, it stands to reason, doesn't it?
I see. I suppose now that you are a reformed character, or rather that you've told us that you are, His Honour and the members of the jury should believe anything you say.
Don't see why not, miss. Everything I've said's the truth.
But even if the defendant was with you in the pub, you don't have any way of knowing whether or not he was trying car door handles in Paxton Street after he left you, do you?
You've indicated by your evidence that Mr. Kent was a particular friend of yours. Is that correct?
He's a mate of mine. I wouldn't deny that, sir.
Well, when he first came to live at the hostel, did he seek out your company or did you seek his?
I don't think I'll get your meaning, sir.
Well, how did your relationship develop? Did Mr. Kent force his company on you?
Well, when he first came, he used to sit round the recreation room and not say a word to no one. So one night I chatted him up a bit.
What did you talk about?
Well, he started off asking me how I'd managed to stay out of trouble for 2 years. So I told him it was partly because I lived in the hostel and partly this group therapy, what we done 2 or 3 nights a week.
Go on.
Well, this group therapy, it don't make you go straight at nothing. I mean, it don't change the habits of a lifetime overnight just like that. But a lot of blokes got a lot of good out of it. You know, so we used to sit round the fireplace and sort of tell each other our life stories, you know.
Did Mr. Kent take any part in these sessions?
Not at first, but later on, after a couple of weeks, there was no holding him. He was chatting away with the rest of them.
Well, what did Mr. Kent reveal about himself when he began to take part in these discussions?
Well, sir, one night there was one of the other blokes there. He was telling us all about his lonely, horrible childhood, you see, sir. And Jim pipes up and he says that how his childhood was a lot worse than the other fellas was. Well, once he got started, there was no holding him. He was rabbiting on all night. It was nearly morning by the time we finished, sir.
So, once he'd broken the ice, did Mr. Kent take part in other group therapy sessions?
On and off, sir. Well, you know, when a bloke's done as much porridge as what Jim here has, it's not all that easy to talk about it in front of strangers. But one night he did say to me that if an old lag like I was could make a fresh start, well, he could have known.
It's pure, unadulterated theatre from beginning to end.
You do me a favour, will you, Pat? If they see us larking about out here, the old beak will do his nut something rotten.
Well, I can hardly wait. It's absolutely archaic.
I didn't want to come here in the first place.
Oh. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Hey, Albert seems to be doing very well. My God. Judge looks like an aging drag queen.
If anyone asks you, I ain't with you, mate.
Trouble with you is you've got no sense of humour, Tom.
You'll laugh the other side of your face if they capture you here howling like that.
Thomas Bernard.
Take the Bible in your right hand and read aloud the words on the card.
Oh, I can't read.
Now repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Here you are, Thomas Bernard, and you live at 22 North End Road, Colchester.
Yeah, me and Jim and Albert, we all live at St Matthew's Hostel for ex-prisoners.
I don't suppose I really need to ask if you are an ex-prisoner, do I? But would you please tell the court if you are, just for the record?
Well, I wouldn't be living in the hostel if I wasn't, would I, Gav?
Well, how long is it since you were last in prison, Mr. Bernard?
Oh, I can't rightly say. Oh, wait a minute now. I just don't remember. See, the trouble with prison is when you come out, you forget about it. Now, that's why it don't reform no one, I reckon.
You were, in fact, released from prison 19 months ago, having completed a sentence of 3 years for stealing lead from a scrapyard to the value of £20.
I got grassed.
Would I be right in saying that those 19 months since you were released from prison are the longest period that you've been at liberty in the past 15 years?
Well, I can't rightly say, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Very well. Do you recall going to the Crown public house on the evening of the 22nd of January this year?
Yeah, I go there most nights after work.
But did you go there that evening?
Well, I don't see no reason why I wouldn't have.
Yes, well, was the defendant with you?
Well, he goes there as often as I do, so he must have been. Here, wait a minute. Now, that was the night he got captured, wasn't it? Yeah, he was there, but he left early, you see, because he had to go the errand for Mr. Livingston down at the hostel.
What errand was that?
I don't know. Yeah, something to do with a sack of spuds, wasn't it?
I'm asking you.
Yeah, that's right, a sack of spuds. You see, he had to get this sack of spuds from the greengrocers, and he made a point of mentioning that before he left the pub.
You take it in turns to run the errands, do you?
Yes, we all take in turns to run the errands, yes, sir.
But what happens if one of the inmates refuses or fails to pull his weight?
Well, it gets brought up into group therapy, and if that don't do no good, he gets chucked out in the end.
I don't suppose anybody particularly likes having his shortcomings discussed in public, these group therapy sessions?
No, of course not, but, you know, once is more than enough. But myself, personally, I don't hold with these exchanging life stories series.
You don't?
No. Because, you see, what's the point in telling geezers things and they might go out and grass on you first chance they get?
Even so, even without the therapy sessions, you have managed to stay out of trouble all this time.
Well, you see, St Matthew's house, it's like a commune. A lot of blokes what's all done time, all living together and getting on handsome. Yeah, and from what I've seen on the telly, there's a lot of straight people took to living in communes too, because they find the strain of being straight, it's driving them right round a bend. Yeah.
I should imagine this case has been the topic of heated discussion at the hostel.
Well, I wouldn't know, miss. I don't talk to nobody about nothing. Well, like I said before, the world is knee-deep in grass.
Well, did you feel the defendant had been hard done by?
Well, I give up feeling for geezers in the nick what's been hard done by. But I thought it was double strong on poor old Jim because he was trying his best to do the right thing, make a go of it.
I see. So 2 CID officers simply caught sight of Kent and placed him under arrest just like that.
Well, it's a doddle, isn't it? I mean, if you've got a bit of form, you're guilty as sus. And all the law needs is verbals, and they notch up another conviction.
Mr. Bernard, my learned friend laid considerable emphasis on the fact that although you may have been a persistent offender in the past, You've not been in any trouble of any kind since you were released from prison 19 months ago. Is that correct?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Well, he definitely reckoned I ain't been in the nick since I got out last time.
Perhaps I'm not making myself quite clear. The question I'd like an answer to is, have you or have you not been convicted of a criminal offence in the past 19 months?
Well, I got captured, went to right with a sack of bluey, but like that was a long time ago, and I told the law it weren't mine. I was just minding it for a mate of mine, what didn't show, and I got dropped in it.
Nonetheless, you were charged with receiving a quantity of scrap metal stolen from the roof of St Anne's Church, Fulchester, and you pleaded guilty to that charge.
Yes. Yeah, but I didn't get no porridge, so it can't do it.
On the 23rd of March 1974, you were convicted of receiving stolen goods at Fulchester Magistrates Court and sentenced to 12 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years.
Is this true?
Yes, Your Worship. But if you don't get no bird, that don't count, do it?
I think you'll find it does, Mr. Bernard.
Well, it just goes to show you what you don't know.
So you admit to having been convicted of this charge?
Well, I can't dodge it, can I?
Thank you. No more questions?
Are there any other details of your previous record that you have omitted to mention?
Of course not. I ain't been trying to hide nothing. If I don't end up in the nick, I don't feel I've been done. And there ain't no more to it than that.
And you have been telling the truth in this court today?
I am under oath, and I do not tell lies.
You are Patrick Livingston, and you are the superintendent of St Matthew's Hostel for Ex-Prisoners at 22 North End Road, Fulchester.
Yes.
You know the defendant, do you not?
Yes, of course, he lives at St Matthew's.
Now, how long have you known him?
About 6 or 7 months.
When he was serving a sentence in Fulchester Prison?
Yes, I visit the prison 3 or 4 times a week.
In what capacity?
Well, I have permission to talk to the men who may like to come and stay at the hostel on their release.
What type of ex-prisoners are these, as a rule?
Well, men who have no fixed abode, recidivists mostly. Men who are unable to maintain themselves in any environment other than prison.
You have a particular interest in offenders of this kind?
That is so.
How many ex-prisoners does the hostel have room for at any one time?
17. But we can take 20 at a pinch.
And these men who come to live at the hostel, how long do they stay as a rule?
Well, it depends on any number of imponderables, but basically they stay until they themselves feel confident enough to leave, by which I mean they've established themselves in a job and feel mentally equipped to cope with the outside world.
And this can sometimes be a lengthy process?
Oh, yes.
Would it be true to say that you give shelter to the most difficult and hopeless cases?
Oh, there's no such thing as a hopeless case. If a man has spent the whole of his adult life in and out of prison, I mean, we'd count it an achievement if he managed to stay out for as long as a year.
In the 2 months that Mr. Kent has been living at the hostel, has he shown any signs of improvement?
Well, it depends what you mean by improvement.
Well, has he shown any desire for a better way of life, to turn over a new leaf?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer in a word. You see, when he first came to us, he was completely institutionalized and unable to sustain himself in the outside world. But he is gradually starting to gain confidence in himself and in those around him.
And you took this to be a sign that he was making progress?
He'd made a tenuous start.
You put it no higher than that?
There is no such thing as instant success, or even failure in my line of work. Jim had put his toe in the water at the group discussions and was relieved to discover that he had not drowned.
Mr. Livingston, what was your reaction when you heard that he'd been arrested?
Disbelief.
Why?
Well, he'd agreed to collect a sack of potatoes from the greengrocers in the high street. He was, as I've said, eager to do his share of the chores at the hostel, and I was surprised when he failed to turn up.
You find it difficult to believe that he is guilty of this offence, do you?
I do not believe it.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston.
Mr. Livingston, I think it must be obvious to everyone in this courtroom that you are a sincere and dedicated man.
I try to do the job to the best of my abilities.
Would I be right in saying that you hold strong and somewhat controversial views about the effectiveness of imprisonment as a deterrent to persistent offenders?
You would. The first rule of prison
is to encourage and assist convicted prisoners to lead a good and useful life. Under the present system, they do not even begin to do that.
Well, you have drawn attention to what you believe to be the inadequacies of the prison system in articles that you've written and had published in a number of left-wing journals, have you not?
Yes. I have published articles in the Marxist Quarterly and Tribune, but also in the Financial Times, the Listener, and Harper's Bazaar. Penal reform, or rather the lack of it, is deeply rooted in politics, both left and right.
You have frequently taken part in television and radio programs devoted to this topic, is that not so?
I have been invited to express my views in the media, but that is not my chief occupation.
Oh, come now, Mr. Livingston, you're far too modest. Only recently you were described in one Sunday newspaper as a trendy crusader, and in another as the champion of the underdog.
I have no control over what is said about me in the press.
But you do seek publicity for your cause.
Oh, publicity is important, yes, of course it is.
So important that you persuaded a man who had already admitted his guilt to the police to change his mind and come here today and plead not guilty.
Oh, that's ridiculous. I encouraged him to plead not guilty because I believed him to be innocent.
Now, did you publish an article in the Harvard League Journal last March entitled Enemies and Victims of Society?
Yes, I did.
And what was the theme of that article?
I expressed a long-held opinion that those offenders who are most often thought of as enemies of society are in reality victims of society.
Would you say the defendant was a victim of society?
Jim is the most misunderstood and overpunished ex-prisoner I have ever met.
Really? Were you with him at the time of his arrest?
No.
Then how can you be so sure that he's innocent?
I have a feeling, that's all.
Feelings, Mr. Livingston, are not facts.
How long has St. Matthew's House been in existence, Mr. Livingston?
About 6 years.
You're its founder, aren't you?
I helped to get it started, yes.
Why did you feel there was a need for such a place?
Society has provided itself with an all too effective machinery for putting men behind bars. But little or nothing is done for them while they're in prison to prepare them for the difficulties that they will face when they get out.
How many men have passed through the hostel since it first opened?
Oh, I don't know. Several hundred, I suppose.
And what proportion of the men who've passed through your hands have subsequently been convicted of a further crime?
Well, for every one that makes a recovery, or goes straight, as they say, there are about 3 who don't.
Quite so. As we've heard in this court today, Tom Bernard has been convicted since he came to live at the hostel, hasn't he?
Regrettably, yes.
And what makes you think that Mr. Kent had not also relapsed into criminal ways?
His progress at the hostel since his last release from prison had given me reason to believe that he would make a go of it.
One final question, Mr. Livingston. Why did you persuade him to plead not guilty?
Oh, I don't think persuaded is the right word. You must remember that he's a man who has spent more of his life in prison than out. He's completely institutionalized and terrified of all authority. I spoke to him in the cells, and it became clear to me that he intended to plead guilty, as he always had done in the past. But whatever he may have instinctively told the police at the time of his arrest, he told me he had not been trying door handles in Paxton Street, or anywhere else for that matter, and I believed him. I simply told him that if he was innocent, he should stand up and say so, and plead not guilty.
Now, Mr. Kent does not deny the fact that the police tried to arrest him and that he resisted that arrest by the use of physical force. He says that he wasn't doing anything wrong and that the arrest was unlawful. Now, if he's right, then the police were not acting in the course of their duty and that arrest was unlawful. And Mr. Kent committed no offence by resisting it. On the other hand, if the prosecution is right, then the accused was being arrested, quite lawfully, under the Vagrancy Act, 1824, which does provide a power of arresting suspected persons loitering with intent to steal. Now, by some people, this old statute, the Vagrancy Act, 1824, is looked on as an anomaly, a bit of a dinosaur, left over from a period in our history when there was a great deal of social unrest, and the authorities sought powers to detain people against whom they could prove nothing, but whom they thought were up to no good. Other people point to the fact that the Act has never been repealed as evidence that Parliament, in its wisdom, considers it a useful cog in the machinery of maintaining law and order. Now, in the end, you must reach your verdict on the basis of the facts as they've been presented to you. And I would remind you in conclusion that the prosecution must prove their case beyond all reasonable doubt. And if you have any reasonable doubt, then you must acquit the accused. Now, will you please retire, elect a foreman, and consider your verdict?
Corporal rise.
Members of the jury, will your foreman please stand? Now, just answer this question, yes or no. Have you reached a verdict on which you are all agreed?
Yes.
On the first count, the charge of assaulting Detective Constable Ronald Forster whilst in the lawful execution of his duty, do you find the accused guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
On count 2, the charge of assaulting Detective Constable Thomas Dunlop in the course of his duty, do you find the accused guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty.
You are free to leave the court.